Hello everyone and welcome back to Wargame Red Dragon. Today we have a replay review for you requested by Sons of Liberty, or actually more of agreed upon after this game was going for quite some time. And Sons of Liberty, I believe, is also known as Pugfather, and he was playing a EB Mac deck on Highway to Seoul, which is a really interesting map to play a mech deck on. I think it really has a lot of opportunities, more so than you might at first think for a map that's this long and a deck that's that slow. And so we met, and I believe I was playing either DGC mech or Scandi mech. Well, I'm doing a replay review against myself, which is a little bit interesting. I'm going to do my best to make sure that my own strategy is not really in consideration here, right? So I'm not going to be giving advice based off of what I know I did next, more of general principles. And the first is that taking something like a Führungsüaz, I think, is almost always a bad idea. It can be tempting to put your numbers of CVs higher, but I think there's really not much of a reason to do it, especially when there are some sturdier options that are available. I mean, this position here gets artilleried so often, it's insane. I really highly recommend that you take this out of your deck and never, ever put one in unless it is literally your only option, and even then think about it twice. Now, another thing we have that I wanted to point out is Special Aufklärer in the SPW40 unloaded right here. And this is, I think, a really bad thing. Like, you don't necessarily think of something like this that's this small as being really potentially game determining, but let's just take a look for a second how far forward this Special Aufklärer is compared to the rest of this mechanized column. And this sort of moto unit can go, I was playing DGC mech, can go all the way up to either this town or this section of woods before it's going to encounter trouble, and that will give you vision over Dimitri and Elena. Well, not all of Dimitri, not all of Elena, but certainly along this main road here, which is really crucially important. Then we have double KPZ T72S1. This is 120 point tank, and I think pretty good for that price, honestly. 18 front, 20 AP. 8 RPM isn't amazing, the accuracy isn't amazing, but it is pretty solid, and this is another big mistake. So odds are, I think this was all going together, and then you see my Laros here, and route the T72S1s over. The issue with this is that there's nothing really in front of them, and even with the MI2 to spot, this MI2 is not the most reliable. A lot of people will have long-range anti-air that can zone this out, and then your two T72S1s are blind. Imagine if you were playing against something like a mixed blue deck, which is still on the table here, although they'd probably take wombats. This just gets Nighthawked, and yeah, I mean, there's a Tunguska over here, but it's not going to be enough to really deal with that, and there's no smoke on the tanks right now, and there's nothing in the way. These Nekaps are going to do, I mean, they're going to die, but at least I established contacts that's farther up, and, you know, goofily enough, they will do a point or two of damage. Here's what we have right now. So the AHS MI2 is dead, the other one fended off by my escort, and these guys can't see anything. They can't see anything, they can't shoot anything, right? And I think if I was to tell you, if you were to stop listening to this video right now, Sons of Liberty, and just ignore everything else that I say afterward, the one thing that I would stress to you is micro your opener a little bit more cohesively, and that takes time to learn. It takes time, it takes practice, everything like that. Now having the Special Aufklärer up here is very good, but if I had been going into a big Dimitri Elena opener, this would have been far too late because of the stop back here, and then the rest of this really isn't doing all that much, and we're 3 minutes in fully, right? And really the only things making contact are those two T72S1s. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit goofy here. I was just honestly doing a little bit of unit testing, but oh, excuse me, sorry. Yeah, I don't know what's up with the frog in my throat, but it's hopping his way. So let's see. Yeah, just look at the board position right now. There's nothing in center, zoned out by single escort, which sometimes it does happen because this is a weak side opener. But then Dimitri, even if we trade evenly here, or even if it's slightly against me from trading here, Dimitri is 90% under my control, and Elena's not contested. And this is what I mean. This is what I mean when I say the one takeaway is to do more with your opener, because basically we're 3.5 minutes in, and the entirety of this fight is going to be an uphill battle for you just to take back ground. So a way to solve that would be to have either your big opener coming down the main highway, or your big opener coming down here and just go for it. Get these infantrymen forward, backed by the tanks, and take ground here, because if I open this side and you can defend against it with a couple of light things, then you're going with your main thrust down here, I have to respond to that, or I risk losing Dmitry and Elena. Right, so it's almost better to counterattack than to disturb what you were going to do entirely, just to zone me out. And yeah, Triple Leopard 2, I don't recommend it. As I said, I was just trying something a little bit goofy, and actually your Conkers, this is a really nice position, so well done with that. Especially because I thought they were going to be smoked off and not be able to see through that, but yeah, oh, that was not great. So, I'm probably not going to be doing the Triple Leopard 2 anymore either. But even for that, even for both of those, well, two of those Leopard 2s dying, we still kill the Tunguska, we still kill a T-72S1, the trading there isn't exactly terrible, and I'm just going to pull back with the Natra, pull back with this, and if we take a look right now at my, well actually let's go to neutral. So, you have a presence that's really sort of back here on this line behind Dmitry. My backline stuff is getting into position here. I have Huzaren, I have a Milan 2 just in case I need to fall back completely. I have Panzergren 90 that are moving up and forward. Yeah, I lost the third tank, but even then, I can withdraw into a very forward position. And on this side, I really don't like this buy. So I think you saw that bow, and you bought a Tunguska to go deal with it. And I think another thing that really needs to be emphasized is not to let units really go in blind, especially ones that are that expensive. So when you think about this, this is an 85-point unit. It's a very powerful anti-helo unit. It's a somewhat capable anti-plane unit. You're paying for that flexibility. You're paying that additional price because it is very capable. And there's nothing here to spot for it. You don't even know that I have infantry that are up this far. Now, I'm not pushing them much farther. I was going to be going toward this town, but I actually assumed because there was so little in Dmitry that you must have opened with something into Elena. So, you know, not all the decisions there are amazing on my end either. But we're playing a game with less than perfect knowledge of what your opponent is doing, and that's really my key point. You cannot bring something that expensive over blind. And rerouting this over to sort of get that vision is nice, but it's really better to have more than that. So a nice way to lock down this section, in case you're curious, is with recon in an ATGM in these two town blocks, something with recon over on the right-hand side as well, preferably with a gun. Now, I don't play a lot of EB mech, but if you just back that up with a cheap tank, which EB mech definitely has access to, then anything that comes down on this side will die. Anything that comes down on this side will probably die, and it really secures this whole angle with a strong presence here as well. Elena is yours, right? And just while we're on this sort of topic, I saw a lot of Motschützen 90 coming forward, and Motschützen 90 they're good. They're one of the strengths of Eastern Bloc Mechanized is the elite Motschützen and Motschützen 90, but you hear there, Motschützen and Motschützen 90, and this is another thing that I think really cost you a lot of points over the length of the game, which we'll see as it plays out here, is there were a lot of Motschützen 90 that were dying, and they're 20 points a pop, right? And there's really no zoning capabilities up here. There's no tank, there's no fire support really of mostly any kind. That RBF, by the way, killed a single 5-point box, right? So it's just things like this that add up a little bit, and I don't want to sound too preachy for it. Like this was actually a really nice pickup, getting that forward position. It just would have been even better if you had rerouted this T-72S1, if you'd kept it in here, and taken advantage of the fact that I wasn't in Dmitry, because look at how far forward you got without those tools, right? Imagine if you'd had even a single tank back here to make it so that, well, this dies, to do all of that, and I think you actually realize this later on in the game and form the basis of your attack with that. And the triple T-72 is actually, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily buy 3. Like, the issue with this, so buying them to zone out the two FL-12s, the cheaper tanks there, is fine, but even then you don't really need 3, you just need 2, because these guys will outtrade the FL, well, the FL-15s, I'm pretty sure. And for 120 points, it's usually better to buy something bigger and more capable, especially when you've seen, you should know by now that this is DGC mech that you're playing against, so you're going to know that you're going to see Leopard 2s, Leopard 2A1s, everything like that in the opposition. And then the biggest thing here, I think, is to pick a place gather, and then push. This is what mech does especially well, and what you need to avoid doing is getting picked off sort of piecemeal like this. So my escort comes up, there's no anti-air back here because, I mean, admittedly this was D-track, so it probably would have been a little bit farther forward, but it feels like instead of combined arms, you had 3 separate places where your different types of arms were. And actually, let's keep in mind the second T-72S1 for a while. It was retreated about 5 minutes ago. It was healed up, which is very nice to heal that up, but there's no recon over here, and yet again it's blind. There's no chaff over here, and so there's nothing in front of it to die for it while it gets kills or while it retreats. And that will come back to haunt that tank, and we'll see that in action later on. It also will help you, I think, if you pick a spot, it'll help you a little bit with your micro, because, oh yep, there it is. There's no recon, the ATGM team wasn't even spotted, and that's 120 points lost for nothing, right? But it'll help you a little bit with your micro to keep this sort of stuff high and tight, and that's, I mean, mech can push in more directions than most decks because of those cheap tools and the abundance and power of those cheap tools with mechanized veterancy, but taking that one position and just going, this is my mechanized horde and there's nothing you can do about it, will also help prevent things like that T-72S1 dying. It's a little bit of a catch-22. You can go wide, or you could go really, really tall, I guess, is a good way of putting it. There you can also see another case of Mochitsu 90 dying without really too much. And this is an interesting thing. So let's look at the T-72. 11 front, 13 AP. And here I have 3 front, 12 AP, but a higher rate of fire. And we can see the differences in these stats playing into this engagement, where the T-72s are shooting at AMX Prees, and they have that low rate of fire, even though they hit much harder and can take much more punishment. But because they're distracted here, because they don't have the perfect sightline as well, these two can't see the FL-15s through the smoke. The third one, that is back here, well, that was back here, can, but it's getting focused down by double FL-15. So instead of taking this 3v2, I'm actually taking it 2v1 right now and distracting your other T-72s, zoning, well, blocking their line of sight with the smoke, and then focusing on one of them with the FL-15s. And this is another part of the reason why having something cheap is so incredibly important. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that Natra and AMX Pre are one of the best units in the entirety of DGC mech, because they have that 3 front armor transport, because they're very incredibly cheap. And now, I mean, I know you don't have access to that transport or anything like that in Eastern Bloc mech, but it really just, it's sort of to that same point. So at this point in the game, we're about 10 minutes in, I'm ticking +1, and you'll notice I'm not really trying to push you that hard. I was trying to blunt your approach and make it so that when you pushed me, you took losses, and we've done that. T-72's dying, Mochitsu 90 dying. I was sitting back relatively comfortable with the trading that I was getting, and so comfortable, in fact, that I was going to go crap Gregory. And this is something that is a little bit tricky to deal with. Once you're down on trading, it can be really hard to recover. And yeah, I mean, that sort of is, I mean, there's unfortunately not many ways around that, right? Like I've had games where I've traded poorly as well, then even if you get good plays later on, it's just not enough to make up for that early trading difference. But on this map in particular, one thing that mech can do reasonably well is take about 100 points and have a decent presence in one of the flanks. And I think doing that, so actually let's take a look at how I've done this. So in order to cap, on this side, I have an ATGM on the side, I have Huzaren, I have a Stinger team, I have some recoilless rifle jeeps, some chaff with the AMX Prees, and then the biggest flaw in this right now is I don't have anything sitting right here, because you could have just walked stuff up and into there, and that would have been rather unpleasant. But anything that really comes into Gregory, whether it's an attack helicopter, whether it's a bunch of vehicles or a heavy tank, it's going to get slowed down enough that I'm going to have time to respond. And if you count up the total points here, it's really not that many. Each one of these is 15, plus the transport is 20, so that's 20, 40. We have another 25 off of both those Milan 2 teams, that's 90 points there. 2 neck halves, that's 110 points total, plus the command vehicle. So 110 points defending is it. That's a little bit over, that's like a minute and 5 seconds worth of income. And with that, I've established a presence in Gregory that would not be impenetrable, but would certainly be tough to take down, and all of that is the same as the points of the T-72S1 that just died right here. So I don't know if that will help maybe put that in perspective a little bit, but it's something that you can do that will help you counteract this tick, because getting tick +1 on this map I think is actually reasonably hard to deal with in the late game. There's a lot of places where it's easy for your command vehicles to get sniped, where it's relatively difficult to hold against a dedicated push in the late game, especially in Dimitri. This is a zone that can often get traded, back and forth relatively often. Another thing I'd like to point out here, so that was actually a really nice pickup with the seed behind the M4, and that is a much better use than the earlier bombing run over on the other side for planes. But when you're behind in trading, when you're behind in position here, oftentimes buying planes is the wrong decision. I mean, actually, if we take a look at this again, my Leopard 1 has 16 front and I believe 17 AP, and that's my heaviest, 2A1, and that's my heaviest tank. Your T-72S1 for 20 points more outclasses them. The way to handle, in my opinion, the way to handle this matchup from your side is to make me take the tank engagement, because you'll win that tank engagement, everything else being equal. And the tools that you have to get rid of are the extra chaff on my side, which I'll be able to afford because my 2A1 is cheaper. So that is something that is a little bit tricky, because every 2A1, I get a 2A1 and 2 reservists for every T-72S1 that you get, so you need to have a way to counteract that amount of spam, but the T-72 is perfect for this. So I think using those in conjunction would have been really, really nice. And this is another thing that I noticed a couple times during the game that I think is also a really bad habit. This is the wrong plane for the job. And this is something that's really important, because the wrong plane for the job is 140 point waste. So we see those HE bombs are going to come in, my 2A1 does get clobbered by them a little bit, but it's going to survive, actually barely, I think I took that on rear armor. Why? I have no idea. Sometimes auto-facing in this game is stupid. Did I attack move backward instead of reverse? Oh, that's why. Yeah, that dealt more damage than it otherwise should have. But the fact that it shouldn't have gotten the kill there makes it a bad buy. You don't want to hedge your win on a low possibility, high impact play unless you absolutely have to, right? And that right there was a low probability, high impact play. You wanted to get rid of my tank to allow you to spread out more in Dimitri, and instead of doing that, you put yourself a minute and 20-ish seconds behind even more on trading, because that plane, while it's in the air, while it hasn't killed anything, hasn't contributed much to the overall amount of stuff on the board, but has subtracted from your presence on it. And that's a really important thing to realize whenever you're buying planes. In fact, I was given some really nice advice by Lord Pie recently. He's one of the top-ranked players, plays Blue Moto, which is very much not mechanized. But his advice was, if you buy more than 15 or 20% of your income in planes, you're going to feel it on the ground. And that statement was made regardless of the kills that the planes get, which, admittedly, if you're getting absurd plane kills, you're gonna be able to make up for that on the ground, but yeah, you're not gonna reasonably expect that in a competitive game, because your opponent isn't just gonna pile all their stuff in one place and say, hey, bomb me here, unless they're really, really unlucky or really, really new, right? So I think overbuying planes is definitely an issue. And just my usual disclaimer on things like replay reviews: when I win or lose when I play games as well, I look over my own replays with exactly this much criticism, if not more. So I recently lost a couple of games to Fenor, both in team games and in 1v1s, and I even won a couple of games against him as well, but for both of those options, for both of those situations, I look over it and, slow things down, pause, look at the board at neutral from my perspective, from my opponent's perspective, and try to consider what went wrong. And so let's do that right now. Let's look at my perspective. We've looked at yours for a while. From my perspective, Elena's very weak. I have Stuttruppen, I have Milan 2, I have some Natra here. More of my defense is in this section of Dimitri, and it's not aimed at pushing this side of Dimitri, at least not yet. It's mostly aimed at preventing you from getting into Dimitri, and then establishing control over in Gregory. And there's really not all that much here, so one option, one thing that I was afraid that you would do would be to completely lock down Elena, which you're currently trying to do here. So this was a nice play, and it made me a little bit nervous, because I didn't have the right tools in the right position to stop you. On the other hand, you have to wonder if I need Elena, right? So I have a fair amount of stuff in center. Just by moving this DAF YA 44, just by moving this truck this far forward, I knew that you didn't really have anything in this side of center, and right here is where I decided, basically, instead of trying to contest Elena too much, my longer game plan was going to be to take center, to cap center as well, and then to win by holding these two zones and contesting Dimitri, if it came to that. Right, so I made the decision here that I don't need Elena, and you're going to see that reflected in my strategy, in my buys, and later on in the push that you make, and the success that it has. So, MI 24p, Moat shoots 90, Führungs UAZ, and this is really, really, really risky. I often do this, well, not quite with this few points, but imagine for a second that I took an escort, 65-point helicopter, and I just sent it this way. Odds are I'd kill that, even if it was blind. The MI 24p probably wouldn't be able to do anything about it in time. It doesn't have air-to-air. I really just can't stop coughing today. My wife's been sick for a week and a half, and I wonder if I am getting what she's got. I didn't record the last couple of days actually because of that. Because I just, man, coughing now is an issue, but it definitely was there. I do apologize. Yeah, I'll try and edit those out in post. Okay, so I made a mental note of that. Hopefully you guys are saying what coughing, I didn't hear anything. Instead I just saw a stutter as we were cut from 1 second to the next. So, at this point in the game, I don't think pushing Elena is too bad of an idea, but I do think that this cap here was not a very good idea. In part for the reasons just shown in Gregory, but also because it's just usually a better idea to cap behind your own forces, right? So if you have a nice amount of stuff here, if your intention is to push me this way, then cap behind yourself. You know that I'm not in Elena. You know that I'm not really threatening in Elena. You know nothing at all about Gregory Center. For all you know, I could have 2 Leopard 2s, 8 Natra, fair amount of recon, and I could be 30 seconds away from shoving that right down this highway, or right down this road, because people will do that in the mid-game. I've had it done to me. I've very much lost games because of that sort of push, and I've won games because of that sort of push as well. And part of the times where you win because of that push is when you go directly in response to a cap and center, and you're gambling on knowing enough about the board state that you don't think they have enough to protect it. So that is a big concern, it's a big worry, and I don't think it was adequately prepared for here. Especially, I mean, yeah, this is just, it's very light. I do like the recon buy there, though. If you're going to do that, best to start establishing the position as soon as you can. So, T-72 S1, and I'm just staying away from it, so that's why you don't really see any sort of push toward this. Once again, wherever this guy is, I cannot handle it tank to tank. So, even just having a 1, keeping 1 alive, really does zone me out pretty well, and that's knowledge that you should have. It's something you should capitalize on, because it's one of the strengths of your deck, right? You have to know the strengths of your deck. You have to use the strengths of your deck as best as you can. Alright, we're getting a little bit repetitive here, so let's go a bit quicker. I want to see this push, because during and after the game, you cited this push as one of the strengths of the things that you accomplished with it, and I think I even said, you know, it was a nicely composed push, it got some good forward pressure, but then I thought about it a little bit more, and the question that I have with it is, what is it intended to achieve? And so if you're watching this, or if you're in the comments, I'd like to hear your thought process on this, because yeah, I'm curious what you wanted to really push with it. Right there, by the way, is another example of a decent trade, but it doesn't actually put you as far ahead as you might think. The 22M4 is expensive, my tank had already gotten some kills, and I got the plane as well, so that can be pretty risky. And I think, so I don't ask that question to say this was not a good thing to do. I actually ask it because I think if you have the answer to that in your head, if you know what you want to achieve with it, you can make even more out of it than you did during this game, right? So let's talk about possible objectives. What you want to do in Conquest generally is establish control over a zone and then fight past it. So I think a nice objective for this push would have been to get control of this town, and potentially even this town. And if you can get control here, you know, between Dimitri and Feder, this is wonderful, because then you can translate this successful push into a push of Dimitri. You can make it so that I can't really reinforce off of Feder, and I have to come in through that main highway into the side, and then your reinforcements can come in from this way, and also along the main highway, and you can just push me out, you can edge me out into Dimitri. And so that I think would be a nice goal, and I'm curious if that was what you had in mind, or if that was if there was something else that you were thinking about during this game that didn't unfortunately get achieved. So here we have BMP 1s, 10 points, and I believe these are standard Motschützen? I don't entirely remember. I know you had the Motschützen 90 and 5-pointers. If these are also Motschützen 90, then I really want to emphasize as well, cheaper infantry help mech decks so much. There's a reason that mech decks have a reputation as being very spammy, and it's not because doing that is playing it wrong necessarily, it's because doing that is often playing it right. So, 2913S, I don't hate that because you have seen an ASF from me already, and here's where we see it, by the way. I see you building up for something here, and I decide, you know what, let's go in. I think we already did hit that CV. The way that happened, by the way, just to show you, my Huzaren spotted it, and then I bought a double stack of M110A2s. It's 180 points, but we killed the CV, paid for one of them right off the bat, and everything else is gravy. So I minimized the impact of the M110s on my own position by getting immediate return on investment for them. And then we have a 2A1, we have just some light stuff here, and center is blue instead of red. And not even for that many points. Again, a single minute's worth of tank, some Huzaren, which are very cheap, and some other very cheap assets, and I'm just bringing up some supporting assets as well to make it more difficult for you to take it back. And for that little investment, that secures me center. It denies you that +1 from having it capped, which puts me back into ticking, and I can cap this later on if I so choose. And that was a really critical breakpoint in this game. So let's take a look at this. BMP 1s, yeah, Motschützen 90. Use your cheaper infantry. Base Motschützen are amazing in EB mech because they trade really well with other people's shocks, and especially against both 20 and 25 point shocks that you'll see very commonly. Imagine you're going up against Eurocorps, right, or even DGC, or even Landshut. You're going to see Panzergren 90, 25 point shock infantry. If you can go up against them and bump and grind in the woods with 15 point shocks, you're going to pound for pound, value for value, get a lot of good return there. So here we have T-72S1. I'm taking that engagement. Just look at how tough that T-72S1 is to deal with. I have two tanks here. Granted, they're not the most punchy, but even then, you nearly took both of them out of commission, and your T-72S1 is fine. And the other T-72S1 is back here as well. Just, I mean, frankly, getting some very nice work done. Imagine if instead of some dead Motschützen 90, you had twice that many, I don't know, just chaff infantry, cheap vehicles, things like that in front of it, and these T-72S1s weren't as in danger of taking incoming fire. That could make a big difference. If that ATGM, I mean, you killed a lot of my ATGM, so very nicely done there as well. But if that ATGM hadn't even fired at it, this guy would, instead of being at 1 HP, could have been at 6 or 7 or 8, something like that. I guess an additional thing here, these Mi-24Ds are very far forward. I didn't have too far forward right now in terms of anti-air, but a lot of people will have anti-air in this section of trees, and will often shoot down those helicopters, so just be careful with that. It's probably a little bit safer to unload sort of back here, and you have to walk up a little bit farther. It's annoying, but it's better to be annoying than to lose, you know, all of this value, right? That's 180 points worth of LSTR and helicopters. In addition to that, even if you call in the group double stacked, it can be very nice to split them before you drop them off, because they'll actually land a little bit faster. Not always, but certainly most of the time. And this, by the way, was entirely a bait. If you ever see somebody turn their ASF away from yours and retreat back over their own space, 9 times out of 10, it's because if you chase, you're going to get shot down by anti-air on the ground. So I saw you wanted to take that engagement. I already knew that my KWS had landed one shot, and therefore decreased the morale of your plane and decreased its chance to hit. And then I just decided, okay, well, if you're going to dive me, I'm not even going to take that. I'm just going to move backward and kill you with ground-based anti-air. So don't get tempted. Don't throw your plane away like that. It's very tempting, I'll admit. It's extremely tempting to do that sort of thing. But keeping your plane alive, keeping your ASF alive, can be make or break very often. So here, this is nice pressure from the Mi-24Ds. My own lack of forward anti-air is showing at the moment, but This is the thing about Mi-24D is the flight size are really not that impressive. Yeah, I mean, they zone me out, but not terribly much more than that. And in the meantime, I don't know if you saw it earlier, but there was a CV that was visible for just a second along this road, and now I've capped center, so that's a +2, and even if we spend the whole rest of the time fighting over here, I don't mind, I'm taking +2. That's fine. Yeah. So I think we've gone over most of it. Let's go a little bit quicker here as this push... Part of why this push failed, to be quite honest with you, is just being down on trading. Yeah, and that's unfortunate, but it is another strong case for better micro early on, and better focus early on, because if you were even 600 or 700 points closer on trading, my investments into Gregory Center would have potentially been catastrophic here. If you had that much more backing this push and going in, I don't doubt that you could have gotten back to this section of town and made me had to, you know, dig you out of there with a shovel, kind of thing. It would have been very unpleasant indeed. So, I guess the only counter-argument there is, if the trading had gone worse, I wouldn't have been as aggressive capping in Gregory and Center, right? So, there's trade-offs in both directions. This is just a little bit goofy recoilless rifle jeep stuff. I do apologize. I hate it when this is done to me, but I just wanted to see what could happen if I took a couple of these and threw them forward. So, you know, we're killing some BMPs, making our way downtown, everything like that. Yeah. Nice spread out on the mortars, by the way. It is nice to have them not all in the same exact stack. I can't tell you how many times two of mine have died to the same counter battery because of things like having them too close together. But I think some of this probably is late game panic as well. And so we're not going to talk too much about individual micro at this point, just because, yeah, I mean, looking at a +2 tick, 340 points on the board, 11 minutes left, I'd be panicked as well. So there's really not too much to say. It was like, these mud shoots in 90 moving forward. Well, what else are you going to do? Leave them there? So I think it is nice to, even if it does change the KD a little bit at the end, you may as well try, right? So I think it's far better to lose with a really bad KD because of the last couple of minutes than it is to lose with a fine KD but by this many conquest points because you never tried to push it back. So I admire your grit for that, and I think that it was a good decision to go for it rather than sit still, for what that's worth. That sort of instinct will win you many, many games as soon as you are even just a little bit better with your trading. This is another reason not to have Jeep CVs, because recoilless rifle Jeep kills Jeep CV and then everything is sad. So, you know, and yeah, this would have been a much better buy, just CV infantry here. And the thing you got to be careful about with that is that this block in particular, these two blocks of town, are really common for where people put their CV infantry. Better to get a little bit creative with it. And then if there is a threat coming from this side, have a little bit of recon, just some cheap stuff to make sure that people can't sneak up into Boris or come from the side like I did through this section. So something to watch out for there. Okay, and then this is just Natra. Yeah, Natra MX Priest. This is really goofy. Escorts are very nice. Didn't get the kill, sure, but I mean, down to 1 strength. Just goofy stuff. Mech is goofy. But honestly, I mean, Mech is goofy, Moto is goofy, Airborne's goofy. Every sort of deck has a different way that it can annoy you halfway to, you know, 5 ways to Sunday or whatever the expression is. So, you know. Yeah. Alright. Well, I think very nicely played. I hope that this is helpful to you. And I think with some different composition and some different decisions there in terms of what you're putting on the front line, it definitely could have been a very much closer game. To back up those T-72S1s, well, not back up, but have stuff in front of them to allow them to operate more freely and more safely, and I think you'll get a lot of return for that change. Also, fewer planes, please. Well, I think that's all we've got. Let's just take a look at the final score in trading here. And yeah, 3005 to 1640 kills, losses. A lot of that came from not being able to keep the T-72S1s that were blind alive. So the first one didn't trade too poorly, killed 2 of my Leopard 2s for it, and then actually I think the ATGM got the third anyway, but then losing the T-72s to ATGMs on the flanks that just didn't have any recon or supporting elements to keep them safe was a big problem. Alright, thank you for hanging around, and we'll see you guys again real soon.